Hello, bookworms. Welcome to The Best Book Ever, the podcast where we talk about your favorite books. I'm your host, Julie Strauss, and today I'm so pleased to talk to Miranda Mackie. Miranda was born and raised in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada, which is also the hometown of Alex Trebek for you trivia nerds out there. Sudbury is where she still lives with her husband and two beautiful daughters. As a family, they love exploring the outdoors, camping, and snuggling their beloved golden doodle, Bailey. Despite all that outdoorsy activity, Miranda calls herself an obsessive, introverted bookworm. She's worked for a nonprofit organization that supports children, youth, and families with exceptionalities and early learning intervention for over 21 years. As you can tell, Miranda is a fascinating person, and I love talking to her about why Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden is the best book ever. If you're looking for a way to help support this podcast that is free and takes up very little of your time, why not leave a review on whatever podcatcher you use? Through some sort of magical algorithm system that I don't fully understand, if a podcast has reviews, it's suggested to new listeners more often. So do it right now. Just scroll down on your phone and hit the Leave a Review button. It'll take just a few seconds of your time, and it really helps me out. I'm super grateful for your support. Now, back to the show. Hi, Miranda. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so thrilled to finally meet you. I love book setups, and you and I were set up by a very dear bookish mutual friend of ours, Mark Lefebvre, and I trust anyone that Mark tells me to trust, so I already feel like we're friends.
Yes, it's putting a little bit of pressure on me, though, to live up to expectations.
Miranda, I want to start by asking you about your reading life, because in your bio, you describe yourself as, quote, obsessive introverted book reader.
Yes.
Tell me what that means.
Yeah, I probably should add just a few more adjectives in that statement today. Well, as far as I can remember, when I was a young girl to now, I've been very obsessed with reading. One, I think because I can read quickly, I usually finish a book in about a day. If it's a really good book and it pulls me in, I'll just obsess all day going to and from the book throughout the rest of my routine at home. So obsessed comes from true meaning and behavior that I have when I pick up a really good read. And I think the introverted part is that I tend to, those that know me quite well, when I pick up a book that I'm kind of really enthralled with, I tend to forget everything else that's going on around me. And I have no real desire to, partake in a social interaction until the book is done.
So is your reading really diverse like this? Are you always reading all over the place?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I read based on the context of what's currently happening in my life. So as a new mom, I probably read nothing that had to do with self-help at all, because my brain was in a complete funk and I probably didn't shower for the first 9 months of my two daughters' lives. So, things like Bumpy Covers, that's what I call those romance, Fabio kind of books. Something that you could just kind of read, not think about, and just like dive deep into it and then forget about it and move on to the next one. So I think it really is dependent on what's going on in my life. I am a huge Brené Brown fan. If I can meet her in person, my life would be complete. However, if I would have picked her up, as a young teen, maybe I wouldn't have connected as much to her. Things like that. It's really contextual for me. And it really depends on like my level of stress. So during COVID, I'm like hungry to read books that are not really too heavy, that take me away somewhere for an afternoon or a weekend that's not related to politics or COVID and the pandemic. Something like a good mystery that you just get kind of enraptured into, right?
Have you found that your reading pace has slowed down or sped up during the COVID times?
I think it's sped up because
Really?
it fills the gap of boredom.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I really do need to disconnect a lot after my work day. And the last thing I want to do to kind of escape is watch TV or like a new movie or something like that. So reading helps to relax me and kind of pace me and prepare me for the next day.
How did you find this book that we're talking about today, Memoirs of a Geisha?
I read this probably in the early 2000s. I think I just saw it on one of those Goodreads book lists and, top 10 that you should read or take time to read. And I normally don't reread books, but for you, Julie, I did.
I'm honored.
I reread this book and I just loved it so much. I thought, this might be a great pick for us to chat about, two women hanging out.
I'm so fascinated by people who don't reread. That is mystifying to me. Why don't you reread books?
I think because once I've read it and taken the journey, been a part of the story, I just like to shelve it and pass it on to people. So I have a dear friend that we pass on books to each other, and she passes it on to her mother, and so on and so forth. So they do end up coming back to me, which is great. But I think it might have to be with the fact that I have a lot of energy. And so I think if I already know what's going to happen, I get bored. So I just prefer not to kind of ruin a book by rereading it. Been there, done that, know the detail. I know who I can recommend it to. And so I'm just not a rereader.
So the books that you keep then, the ones that you have on your shelf, you keep them just for the sole purpose of loaning?
Yes, or just to stare at.
I'm sure there's probably a Japanese word for this, but that is such a there's something so soothing about just having them near you.
Yes. Or seeing and remembering when you read it. It might be you haven't seen that, like the spine or the cover of the book for a little while. But when you walk past it, you're like, oh yeah, I remember I read that one. It probably still has sand from the beach. I'm a big highlighter and I tab things, Post-it notes is going to love me. So you see the ones that are most worn because you've had it maybe a little bit longer than others, or the pages being turned. Likely why I've never transitioned to, an e-reader or like an electronic version. I really like to feel the book in my hands.
So what was it like to reread this book?
It was great. I had forgotten how beautifully poetic it was, particularly now during the pandemic. I loved the imagery that this book produces. You could really position yourself in Kyoto or just sitting under a cherry blossom tree and kind of picture yourself in the locations of all the players in the book. And I found it very soothing. I almost feel like, the author is kind of reading to me in this soft, calm voice. I don't think I got that the first time I read it. I got that more the second time. I could feel myself breathe a little bit quieter when I was reading this, or just be a little bit softer while reading it, which was kind of a cool experience for me.
Can you describe the plot for our listeners who, I know it's a blockbuster of a novel, but for anyone who maybe hasn't read it?
So it follows this young girl's life. She grows up in this small fishing town. And unfortunately, some things happen early on in her life that require that she move with her sister and be sold, basically, to a new family who raises her in a geisha house. And basically, the plot is her life of kind of becoming more of herself and becoming a geisha, and the interactions and the love story that's woven into it. As well as, for me, the plot is really about a lot about interactions amongst multiple women with different personalities. So she has what she calls sisters, who are very, very different characters who influence the woman that she becomes. And in the end, there's a wonderful, happy ending, I guess what you can say, without giving out too much, as she reflects back on her life.
What is it that drew you back to this book? Of all the books that you don't like to reread, and I really am curious. And it's so interesting that what you thought about it this time was how soothing it was, which is definitely, indicative of our COVID times. When you looked over your shelf of your books that you've loved and don't reread again, what made you want to read this one?
Yeah. I feel like I got to find something really pivotal to answer that, that question.
You do not. Honestly, I read books just for the cover all the time.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Thank you for acknowledging that. I think there was 2 books on my mind. So this one and Barbara Kingsolver, The Poisonwood Bible. Have you ever read that
Oh,
one?
I love that book.
Oh, yes. Those were the 2 that had the most lasting impact, that when we talked about what's an influential book for you, or a book that you want to share with others, those were the 2 that came to mind instantly. So I said, okay, it's got to be one of the 2. And Barbara's books, is a little bit deep for this period of time. And I felt like I just needed something a little bit, more descriptive and poetic to kind of lean into. And even just when they're describing the preparations, I don't know, I found it so the Golden really takes the time to describe it in a way that soothed me. And I can picture the slow movement, the intentional slowness that Japanese culture has in everything that they do. They're not in a rush, and they're not part of that rat race of life, right? And so when he describes her preparation, to go out to the ceremonies or to the parties, he does it in such a way that you can put yourself in that position to say, wow, this makes you take a breath, right? And just kind of slow down and really enjoy what he's talking about. Even just how she's applying the makeup to her lips, and a little bit of contextual learning around the Japanese culture of the importance of the white makeup, and what does it represent for their skin, and so on and so forth. I found that really fascinating, because to your point, we're moving through life so quick.
What were you thinking reading it after all these conversations we've heard over the last several years about own voices authors? Because I really was pondering a lot about the role of a white Western man writing this novel. And so I am curious to know, did that change your read through this time?
I don't think so, because I found that, well, it's a white Western man capturing the voice of a woman, right? I don't think so. I think he does such an amazing job capturing it in such a accurate reflection that I never really noticed it. Maybe I should have a more provocative response to that, but I didn't. What I noticed this time more than I did last time, maybe because I'm getting more mature, as we like to say, was the interactions of the women. I was much more conscientious about how Momo, how aggressive and how unkind she was to her sisters, and how that really defeated their confidence and who they were, and almost violent. She was violent, actually. And so I noticed that interaction and that kind of women hierarchy a lot more than I probably did in the first read. But to say that I noticed the author and did I question whether he is the right voice for a book like this? Probably not, but more the women, it really stuck out to me, because that this year has all been about, a great deal of movement for women to build each other up and to celebrate and cheer people on. And this book definitely does not have that,
Right. But at the same time, it's set in a time where they have to be pit against each other, because they are literally fighting using their bodies and their skills for a finite resource, which is the money of men, if they can't exactly go out and get well-paying jobs. So it's certainly understandable.
Yes.
And I don't think you do need a more provocative response, as you said, because I think so many times we do go back and read books that we liked maybe in our childhood and go, oh my God, this is the most racist nightmare I ever saw. Yes. So I was kind of thinking, oh, I'm not going to like this as much this time around. We're different in 2020. And I was really surprised that I didn't have that feeling. It didn't feel, I don't know, paternalistic or something.
Yeah.
I do want to read this written by a Japanese woman. I would love to see more
Yes.
perspective on that, but I didn't mind this one at all.
No. And what was also, at the end, the very end of the book, can I talk about it without giving it away? Like, I don't want your listeners to be like, I want to read it, and then I give parts away.
Okay, well, we'll just give a warning. We're going to talk about the end. It is a 23-year-old bestseller book, so I'm kind of thinking most people might know the end, but you've been warned. Skip ahead 5 minutes if you haven't read it.
I guess what brought me back this time was the pumpkin, the interaction in the end when Sayuri, I can't say her name very well, asks her to set up Nobu, right? And to bring him in, and so she can be caught and kind of end a very tumultuous relationship that she was very fearful of ending herself. And she kind of backstabs her, right? In that situation. I was like, oh, I can remember that happening in high school. Like, that part particularly brought me back to, I'm a white woman, and I grew up in a very white high school in a white culture. And we had a hierarchy in high school. There's an in-group and a popular group, and that kind of really catty behavior of breaking someone apart. That part in particular brought me back to that. And I was like, oh, we were a lot like that in high school. And I wonder what it's like now for a young girl in high school. Is it the same? Yeah. Is it different? Is it better now that we have these wonderful movements to build us up? I don't know. And our parenting is different too, right? I think, if I reflect on my parenting, I grew up in a household where my dad was the breadwinner. He's a miner. Everybody that's from where I live is a miner. And my mom was stay at home for a really long time. So that perspective, she kind of holds, my mom still holds the perspective that when I say I'm traveling for work or I'm going away for work, and she's like, well, what's Andrew going to do when you're not home? Andrew being my husband. I'm like, he's going to parent. And she still finds it very odd. And I'm like, Mom, it's like 2020. How are we still in this space where when a woman is not at home or they're working full time, that it's going to impact the family unit, right?
Yeah, right.
So I would hope I would hope that the interactions between women begin to become stronger, and we're a little bit braver in speaking up to women who are not so nice to each other. I hope, anyways. I have hope.
So, did you know that Memoirs of a Geisha was a movie?
I did. Yes, I've watched the movie. Yeah.
Is it good?
I liked it. I felt like it was a good match to the book, and the chosen main actor to represent the main character. Her eyes were just as enthralling in the movie as they were in the book. Like they do spend a lot of time.
Gosh.
Yeah, it was awesome. The only parts that I don't remember as being present is in her early childhood. I don't know if it pulled you in, like right at the beginning of this book, she talks about her tipsy house and her small little fishing town, almost to the point where you can like visualize, each of the unique, settings that she talks about, like the fishery and then her house and how long it was to get up to the tipsy house and how it's on the edge of the ocean. There wasn't a great deal of that in the movie. There's like a little bit of a glimpse of it, and then it moves right to she's being sent away. So that I kind of missed, because I'd love to see where her roots were, right? And be in that little town of when she was a little girl and what she looked like. But definitely the main actor, her eyes are just as brilliant as the story describes it to be, in the love story, right?
Well, I'm not surprised they had to cut some things out because it's so texturally rich and detailed that, of course, they couldn't get it all. It'd make a great miniseries, though.
Yeah, good idea. I did read that lots of people felt it was too descriptive. Like they were bored to the point of like boredom in reading this book.
Interesting.
I never got that, but some people said
I didn't either.
Yeah. Well, some of the reviews that I had in preparation for this were that he got too descriptive to the point where it's like you just wanted him to get to the point. And then I was like, I wonder if they're reading it like during this period of time where everything is just like go, go, go. And so they're trying to rush to the end, or if
Yeah.
it's just his style didn't connect to that particular reader. But there were quite a few reviews talking about that his poetic kind of writing was too much for them. I never found that, but be warned.
No, because I think he pulls it off so skillfully. Like you said, you can picture that tipsy house. And those descriptions of the kimono, anything that sends me straight to the internet to see more of it, I always think, oh, that was written well.
Yes.
Because I had this vision in my head, and then I had to see precisely. He even talked about how important the undergarments were to make
Yes.
the bow hold in the right spot, and it was fascinating. I
Yes,
guess I
loved
can
it.
see if you really want a propulsive sort of plot-driven book, I suppose this isn't it. It's a very emotional and descriptive book.
Yes.
What about you? Do you have a favorite part?
Well, the one that comes to mind is when she's describing the moth. Like, I flagged it because I go back to it, where she's speaking, like she's comparing the dead moth to herself and how contrasting they are. I don't know if I might have flagged it. Anyhow, so she's in the is it Okayoto? I'm so bad with the names, like the pronunciation. I make them up in my mind, but in their home. And she's been beaten and she's defeated, and she's like, I'm not going to make it here, and my life is over. And she describes being in the middle of the home, because in Japanese culture the homes are built in a circular format. So she's sitting, it's raining, and she's on the ground on these stones, and she sees a dead moth, out of the corner of her tearing up to in reflection on how bad her life is. And she sees the dead moth, and she begins to compare his state of how he looks and how beautiful he must have been, and to herself, and how they're very different. And I remember flagging it, saying that's the descriptive poetic nature of this author that I loved. Because it really just brings you to visualize her in the center of that home, and being just completely, utterly defeated, and thinking she's about to die. She's lost her sister, and this is the end of who she is, and her history is completely lost, and she just sees this moth.
So you said you're a big highlighter and flagger. Tell me what else you noted or highlighted in this book.
I flagged like comparisons of Hatsumo to the tiger. He compares her to a tiger in very different ways. Like, he'll just he'll speak about an event, and then he'll say like a tiger in the long grass, looking for her prey. I find that really brilliant, because he does it in a way that doesn't stick out, but he'll speak, and yet again, he says, and yet again the tiger strikes, and then he'll go into the descriptive nature of her behavior to Sayuri. But that's basically what I highlight, is like little things like that.
Oh, you have a lot.
Yeah. I did like the book.
And do you catch things like this on your first read through of books? Will you catch themes like the recurring theme of the tiger or the moth, or well, you must, because you don't reread.
No. And I think that's why I don't reread is, I feel like I'm just going to treasure the first time I've gone through it and experienced it, right? But yeah, I usually do anything I do, even for work. Like when I was in school, I went back later in my life to my master's. If I pick up and hold all my textbooks, they're very much color-coded and underlined. Wow. And it's like a deep, when I read something that's really deep for me, I just highlight it and flag it. So when someone asks me something, I can go back and say, oh, I've got this quote for you, and kind of go back and flag it for them, right? I love that feeling of kind of knowing that, or living and being a part of that. Yeah.
Do you know how many books you read in a year?
Well, I always set a goal. So I do set a challenge. I'm a bit of an obsessive compulsive person, a pretty organized person this way. But anyhow, I like to make challenges. So every summer I try to make a challenge of reading. Last year it was 40 books in the summer.
Just for the summer.
And probably for the year, I'd say, I haven't counted it, but I would say I'd like to achieve at least 100 a year. And I love buying them. Like I want to support the author and I want to go out and buy them. I love libraries, but I love buying them and having them and them being my own.
So do you have a goal for 2021? That's your number goal?
It's too early in the year, Julie, to set a goal.
Fair enough. Do you ever
I'm waking up from your presidency. Let's just be honest. I was not reading anything other than waiting for Trump to leave. And then we'll begin the year. So officially it has not started. This year has not started until Biden took over.
Yeah, correct. I know exactly what you mean. I read a hell of a lot of Bumpy books over the last 4 years. I'll tell you that. Yeah. Please, God, take me back to Regency, England, just for the night. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But maybe I'll track it and like aim to do 100. Or I think this year what I'd like to do is explore a new genre. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Because I tend to pick up the same like nonfiction. I'm not a huge like romance book reader. Like sometimes I will, but generally only in summer. Oh, sorry. But I might explore something new, like autobiographies, because I generally don't pick those up very often. So I've always wanted to read a few more books on that. So that might be something I'll try.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what are you reading? What are you reading right now?
Well, we just finished, I'm part of a book club that just finished, we finished Untamed, which is absolutely awesome. And then From the Ashes, I think his name is Jesse is the author. It's a book on Indigenous culture and his nonfiction story of himself. And then a few just like Bumpy Covers. That I'll flip through. I haven't quite gotten to yet.
So much.
They're on my nightstand. And I just, our friend Mark recommended. I haven't gotten to it yet because it's a little heavy for me. I'm just going to wait for the right moment. But it's White Fragility, why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. I mean, it's a bestseller. And I just finished Peter's book that he published, A Rough Night's Sleep, that Mark supported. That was, I bawled throughout the whole book. So I think that's why I put this on the side, because it's like, ooh, that was a heavy book. I need to like sit in a place on reflection of what my role is around homelessness. And I haven't quite reached out to books since that one. Not to say that, it's impacted me negatively in any way. It's just, I need to sit and stew about that reading a little bit.
Well, and particularly, I think for those of us, because I also read pretty fast, and I do sometimes have to force myself to stop and say, you need to just think for a bit before you dive into the next heavy topic. Because I can easily just read, something like White Fragility, and then the next night pick up, the next thing, and without really, and then I'm not sure, I know you're absorbing some of it, but I'm not sure it's really doing the work that I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I think it sounds like we both put a little bit of pressure on ourselves to take some reflection or learning from those types of books that are, deemed to be self-help or knowledging, inspiring, right? And I think the last year, 2020, has been about reading books that expand our awareness and, make us a little bit of a better human, show more compassion to our vulnerable populations and what can we do? And that's heavy work. You can't fly through it like Memoirs of Geisha or, some other Lisa Jewell bumpy cover book that you're reading, right? So I think you have to temper that type of stuff so that you really give it honest reflection on how it's going to influence your day-to-day life, right? And I think that's important. It honors the people that write them, Brene Brown, one of the quotes I always think about for authors and people in creative work is it's one of the most vulnerable things that they can do to share their stories with other people and to be open to judgment and criticism for something that they're producing from their very core, right? So I try to honor each of the books that I read for that reason, because that's hard work, writing a book and asking the masses to talk about it. As you know.
Yeah. And what a nice way to respect the author too, just to spend time with your thoughts of it afterwards. I need to get better about that. And I don't keep a reading journal. And I think that's why I lose my memory of books so quickly. And that might be a nice way for me to honor the book a little more.
Yes.
Some thoughts of it afterward.
Yes. Or I'm being educated, like write reviews, right? I know how meaningful that is for the author and for the publisher, is to take the time to share your experience, good or bad, with the writing and what it brought to you when you read the book. So I'm definitely trying to do that. Maybe that's a goal rather than a number of books, is to be, more reflective of reading it instead of going through the count. Is what did it bring for me? What did it, in terms of awareness, or just maybe just joy, like something fun, you're tapping into your inner child with a good book at sometimes. So that's maybe the goal for 2021, is be a little bit more reflective and honor the creativity that's being shared with you from someone unique as the authors that we have, right?
Really circling back to what you said at the beginning about your appreciation for Japanese culture and the mindfulness of it.
Yes. Yeah. Current circumstances, right? I think I've experienced that for the first time. Things that I've learned 2020 for sure is to slow down and to just enjoy and to have a little bit more fun. I can be a pretty work-driven, serious person. That's why I surround myself with lots of really fun and goofy people, because they bring that out for me. But definitely, having breakfast as a family, like sitting down, and we're not having to rush because I'm working from home in my Lululemons, right? So that kind of stuff is just slowing down and being mindful. And I find my reading is getting that way too, even just research articles. I love reading research articles. It's becoming much more thoughtful and like, okay, how does this apply, or does it even apply to where I'm at and what I want to do with the rest of my life, right? So thank you, COVID, for that.
One silver lining, one tiny silver lining. Miranda, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Mark was absolutely right that I would absolutely adore you. So I'm so grateful. I'm going to have to send him flowers or something.
Oh, you are too kind. I'm so glad we were able to do this. And maybe one day in person, I'll be able to meet you.
Oh, wouldn't that be fun? If this ever ends, we'll have a coffee and book date.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Thanks for listening, bookworms. For more information on this episode and links to all the books we discussed, please go to our website, bestbookeverpodcast.com, or follow the podcast on Instagram at bestbookeverpodcast. I'm your host, Julie Strauss, and you can find me everywhere as Julie Wrote a Book. Remember, when you're doing your book shopping, please help support indie bookstores and this podcast by using my affiliate link at bookshop.com/bestbookever. Thank you for joining me today, and I will see you at the library.